Thank you very much, Emma, for the introduction. So welcome everyone at today's Reactor Stockholm session. As Emma already said, we will be discussing today more about Microsoft Bot Framework Composer. Emma already introduced me a little bit. I'm based in Belgium. I'm a managing partner at Arinti. I'm also a Microsoft AI MVP. And I'm quite active in the community. Well, since I'm an MVP also in the global AI community, you will see me hosting every week the AI Talks live. Now, today we're here to talk about Bot Framework Composer, but before we go on about that, we'll do some small introductions about what is a chatbot, but also what tools we can use for that. Now, what is a chatbot? Well, it's an application, just like any other application. But the main difference with a default application is, of course, the input. Where in a classic application, we might need to just enter some text in a form or so on, or we need to click on certain things. With a chatbot, well, the only input we have is what we are typing or conversation-based input. Now, this can be very hard because if you look at this picture, if we say talk about a bike, well, it could be about many different kinds of bikes. It could be a bike where you can sit with two behind each other, a bike with only one wheel, a classic mountain bike, for example, or maybe it's a racing bike. So language is something very hard to understand, and that's also the difficulty within chatbots. Except that, of course, we also have the UX that is totally different from another classic application, and is that you're based on purely input and what you can see. Within a chatbot, as a user, you might be able to send an image, you can send an audio recording or an attachment. That's all possible, just like in classic applications. But as well as the bot on itself, he can also send you files or show videos or images and so on. Now, chatbots on itself are nothing new at all. The first chatbot was built in the 60s, was it? It was called Eliza. It was built by Professor Joseph Weizenbaum, a professor at MIT. Now, the chatbot that was built at that time was somehow to mimic a caricature of a human conversation as a psychologist. And actually, people were really starting to tell their problems to Eliza, which was quite funny, and how well it was working. Now, the way it was developed at that time, the NLP that was behind it, was actually really the basis of what we're still building on these days. If we think about how good a bot is, we might know of the Turing test. How well is a computer capable of thinking like a human? We will see that, well, we see in the current bots that exist, that bots are good in particular tasks, just like you have AI models that are good in specific tasks or mimicking specific human behaviors, but not in general AI. That's something we're way far from. If it's ever going to be possible, that's a big question mark. Now, what tools do we use to build chatbots? One that I personally like a lot is the QnA Maker. And to introduce you to QnA Maker, well, we're on a chat, so it's harder than just the live public. But if you think about the question, what company of Elon Musk makes flamethrowers? Well, it's the Boring Company. And I want to show you in a little demo what we can do with QnA Maker. Should play. Okay, so the Boring Company has an FAQ page like many websites, but that's quite boring, just as the name says, the Boring Company. Now, what we would like to do is use this content to generate a QnA Maker service to be able to use this in a chatbot. So what we do, we can just copy the URL and we will paste it in QnA Maker, and we create a new knowledge base. I'll just fast forward a bit. We give our knowledge base a name, and then we populate it with the URL that we collected. We create our knowledge base. What will we get at the end is a filled knowledge base with all the questions and answers within that FAQ page that we just extracted. Now, from the moment we save and train, we just say we can already ask questions like, what about tunnels? Which is not a question that is exactly here. Here we're saying why tunnels. I will get perfectly the answer that was linked to that question. Now, QnA Maker, the good thing about it is that you don't need any coding for it. It has the automatic extractions from an FAQ list, for example. It has multi-turn conversations. What do I mean with that is, for example, when you ask the question, where can I find a school, that the chatbot may ask you, what kind of school are you looking for? Is it a music school? Is it a sports school? Is it nursery? And so on. There's also active learning in place. Of course, scaling if you're building a chatbot just as a proof of concept or you're using it for 1 million users, and support in many languages. I'm very happy that I'm from Belgium. We are Dutch speaking here, well, partly, that it's also included. Now, QnA Maker is very handy because you can give this to a business unit and let them just add questions and answers to it without them having any technical knowledge of how a chatbot is built. But this is a service that we will implement later within our chatbot. Now, a second service is LUIS. And LUIS is the language understanding service of Microsoft. If we think about sending sentences to a chatbot, we need to understand what the user is saying. And to give an example, I want to book a flight. Well, the intent that we will figure out, well, that LUIS needs to figure out of that sentence is that the person wants to book a flight. So it needs to be directed to the dialogue within your chatbot to start the process of booking a flight. Now, we wouldn't want to have a chatbot where we say, I want to book a flight to New York. You will go to the correct dialogue, but then it will still ask you, where do you want to go to? Well, that would kind of be stupid and make your chatbot very inhuman. So what will we do? We will add entities within our sentences. And in this case, I want to book a flight to JFK. So we have the book a flight as an intent, and we have JFK as an entity. Now we can also enhance that with multiple entities, well, same entities but different roles, or from airport and or to airport. Also, this can be trained within LUIS to be able to make your chatbot smarter, or we can even extend it by adding multiple entities, so we can also extract the time of when you want to fly. Of course, we have the full voice enabling also, and the next step of a chatbot is a voice bot. If you would like to do that, these days we have in private preview also the telephone service within Azure, so you can link a chatbot to a classic fixed line number, so you can just call to your chatbot, which is actually very cool. But to give some examples of the voice enabling, I just want to show, I need to quickly check. Well, I would just say, because I don't think I've switched on my sound while we're here soon. If you don't hear anything, I would say go to the search for Neural Voices Microsoft, and you will find all these examples. It's actually what I just want to show within that little example, but I forgot to share my sound with this, is that we can build custom models to understand specific vocabulary, but also on specific locations. Like if you're on an airport, you have a lot of noise, or in a manufactory, to remove actually that noise with a pre-built model that you can train by just sending in audio fragments. Now, to go to the bot framework itself. I'm talking too fast. Bot Framework SDK is already a service that exists for a couple of years. It's a software development kit, which means it's something you need to build, for example, in Visual Studio Code or any other development tools that you like to use to code your chatbots. Now, this is the full description of what Microsoft is, how it's describing Bot Framework SDK, but I picked out a couple of items of it easily model and build sophisticated conversations, comprehensive experience, simple text, but also complex rich cards, natural language interactions, and so onwards. This is all things that are possible within Bot Framework SDK. It's open source. It exists already from 2016, as I said, a couple of years. So yeah, March it will be 5 years since the first release. You can build chatbots with Bot Framework SDK in a couple of languages, from C# to Java, JavaScript, or Python. Now, the cool thing about Bot Framework SDK is that you can build one chatbot, so one code base, and publish it to many different channels. Well, actually, your publishing will only happen one time, but by making use of bot service within the, Microsoft Azure, you can easily, by just clicking on some items, activate your chatbot, for example, on Teams, or activate it on Facebook or Telegram or WhatsApp, or soon telephone also, Google Home, and so onwards, or even on a web chat through direct line. How does it look? Well, this is just a snip out of some code. What we see here is an on members added function. These are some basic default functions that we use. And here we're just gonna say, once we have a new user connected to the chatbot, we'll just send hello and welcome. And then the second function you see here, the first one, will each time that the user sends a message, it will return the same message back. So it's a simple echo bot. Oh, last year, some missing links came compared to competitors. Since Microsoft Bot Framework was very code-based, there was no visual UI of how are my flows going. So for business, it was very hard to understand what was going on. So with Power Virtual Agent, there came out a new service on the Power Platform that really gave the power back to the business, where NLP was still possible, but also where you could make actions within your chatbot through Power Flow tasks. This is one big platform, Power Virtual Agents. It has some reporting also around it, so it's also very nice. Helpbots is a totally different story. It's also with a visual UI. Just let me show you a bit how it looks, the visual UI. But really, it has all the specific licenses, so it can be used within the healthcare industry. But at the back end, it's all based on Bot Framework SDK. And we're reaching now to what we really want to discuss today, and that's the Bot Framework Composer. Personally, for me, this was really the missing link compared to what competitors have, to have a more user-friendly way, but still very sophisticated to build chatbots, and that, well, when you have built something and you give it to the business, that they can still understand what is happening. I'm not going to say that this doesn't need to be done by developers, but with some good training, I'm sure business users will be able to use Bot Framework Composer also. So I call it the SDK Plus. It's a layer on top of the SDK, and it has a visual UI to build your conversations flow. It has ways to build your natural language understanding within the same tool. It has QnA services to add questions and answers, to also make use of it, language generation, and so on. But we'll all see that in a bit in the demo. This is also purely open source. It went public during Ignite in November last year, and we're now at release 1.11, if I'm not wrong. It went actually in a general available only in May 2020, so it's not so old yet, but it's changing very fastly. This is how it looks like, but from here on, we will just go into the demo. Just need to pick the correct. Okay. Where is my virtual machine? Here it is. Okay. So Bot Framework Composer is an installable file, well, application that you can just download from the GitHub of Bot Framework Composer. And there's a second tool that you will need as the Bot Framework Emulator. Both are available on GitHub to install and free of charge. Bot Framework Composer is also available as a web application, so you can run it, for example, in a Docker container and run it within your own environment. Now, what we would like to do today is build a chatbot from scratch, and in the meanwhile, I'll give you some explanations of the functionalities that are there. So we'll start with a new bot we'll do from scratch. But if you see here from template, you already have a couple of examples. If you want to see how certain things are done, well, then you can find them here. So we do it from scratch. We'll call it WeatherBot Stockholm. Okay, so we have our main dialog here, and the dialog can have different triggers. And in this case, our first trigger is the greeting that we can use. So I will start our bot so you can see what's already happening. I will slide this to the left and to the right. All right, so services in the background are now starting up. If you have any questions in the meantime, please don't hesitate to ask on the chat. I see there's already one question. If the SDK is available for JavaScript, yes, it is. For Go, I don't think so. But for JavaScript with Node.js, it's possible. I hope that answers your question, Ali. Okay, so the bot is running now, and now I can start the emulator, which is a second application that will start. And I'll just drag it here on the side. So welcome to the empty bot sample. So to give you some introduction also to the bot framework emulator, the bot framework emulator is linking to a specific API, which is running now at the moment, and with a specific key in the background. It's cool here that here in the top, we have a restart conversation with a new user ID or with the same user ID. And we'll see later on why that is a handy functionality. Okay, so our first item that we see here is welcome user. Now we would like to change that to something else. We're building a chatbot that will help us with things about the weather data. And you see here already the text language generation. Now, what does that mean? I'll just paste in some items that I have here. And now I have added 3 sentences within the language generation. And each dash, you see here in the beginning, is actually one of the 3 that the chatbot could pick to show the user. And that way, your chatbot does not always react with the same thing. So it might randomly select 1 or 2 or the first, the second, or the third one. So if we just restart the bot, so we each time need to restart the bot or reload it to be able to within the emulator. All right, so hey, I'm a friendly bot that can help with the weather. Try saying weather. Now, if you would say something else, hey, I'm a friendly bot and can help. Howdy, weatherbot is my name, and so on. Okay, this is language generation. We can do more in this. We can add parameters also in it, but we will see that later on. Now, if we click here on our bots, it's the main bot, the main dialog. you will see recognizer type. Default recognizer means we are using Lewis to understand what the user is saying and linking it to the intent. We also have the regular expression, and we will start first with that one. Now, what I want to do is on our main dialog, we want to add a new trigger on weatherbot Stockholm. And the intent recognized, which in this case is a regex trigger, intent recognizer, sorry, we'll call it just weather. And the regex pattern, well, the moment someone says weather, we want to go there. Now, within what we could do here is already build a full dialog of all the things that we want to do. But that's not really so clean. So what we will do is create a separate dialog. I will call this one get weather. And now we have this one, and we have a new dialog here also. So within get weather, we have our start beginning dialog, and we can, for example, send a response. I will say, hi there. Let's set immediately the correct one that I wanted to use. Let's check the weather. Okay. Now, the moment I say weather, this item will be triggered, but now I need to say, well, what it actually needs to start. So I will do dialog management, and I say begin a new dialog, and I can select here what I want to run. So in this case, get weather. Why am I not building or adding my responses here and build my full dialog here? Well, if we would want to call this get weather also from another dialog, well, you cannot go from one dialog to another trigger. So here I have my trigger, and I start my new dialog here. So that means this get weather, I can reuse it for in other places. In the meanwhile, we'll also add some other items. I will add another trigger which is called help, and another one which will be cancel. Right. Cool. Okay. We have our response that we're sending, and let's check the weather. And the next thing we want to do is asking the user, what is your zip code? Because based on the zip code, we want to send back the weather data. So we have ask a question, and from here on, we can choose already what kind of input we expect from the user. So some validation can be done. And in this case, we just want some text. And what I will do here is, instead of just adding text, I will add an activity. Now, an activity is some kind of a box that I will show where I can add buttons also to. It could be also a hypercard, something we will see, hero card, sorry, something else we will see, where you can add images, for example, within your message. This one here is purely showing the text, and I added suggested actions. And with suggested actions, we are showing some buttons near the input field of the chatbot, chat box, you should say, where they can click on, but they are not necessary to use them. Okay. Now we have our bot asks. Now we have our user input. Now in our user input, we need to define where the input will be saved. Now, it's good to know that we have three different kinds of properties, variables. We have everything that starts with user dot, your variable name. You have conversation dot and your variable name, and you have dialog dot. Now, what's the difference? I already showed you within Bot Framework Emulator that we have our new user ID or same user ID, so you can restart the conversation. For example, you are using Facebook as a platform to make your chatbot available. Well, that means that if you save things on user level, that once your user comes back the next day, you still know you can still use that data that was saved at that moment. On dialog level, well, then we're really staying within our flow that we see here right now in our composer. And then we have conversation level. Well, that's really your session, you could say. Okay, but in this case, we would like to save our zip code and the user element, and we call it user.zip code. Output format, well, we can already do some formatting here. So we will do a trim of this dot value. So this dot value is the wait, typing very wrong. This dot value. This dot value is what we're getting back. And then we have other, and in other we will fill in, for example, what we're doing here is, sorry, I do not understand this value. So what we sent, he didn't understand. So by making use of this $sign and the curly brackets, we can use these values within our text. So please specify a zip code in the form this or that. We can add validation rules. We need our zip code to be needs to be 5 characters long. So we can do something like this: length of this dot value equals 5. Don't forget to press enter, because otherwise it will not be saved. Keep that in mind. So we can also add an invalid prompt. We're actually saying almost the same as the unrecognized. Okay. Now let's see what this already gives and what it does. So we'll restart our chatbot and see if our trigger is already working. Okay, so I can restart our conversation here. And let's say cancel. It will not do anything. Why not? Well, it will probably been gone to this intent, the cancel recognize, but we haven't linked anything to it, so it just goes immediately back to the higher level. So if we say weather now, well, okay, we got into our weather dialog. Let's check the weather, and it's asking me, what is your zip code? Now, as I said, those suggested actions gives you possibilities to show buttons, and we see here help or cancel. This is the same as me saying cancel. So if I would click on here, I would actually type help and send it to the chatbot. Well, I've clicked on it now, and since help is not a valid 5-digit number, as is, well, not 5 digits, it gives me the error, and I need to fill in something else. So that works perfectly. Now we want to extend this a bit. We want to add our help dialog. We call it help. And we'll do another one. Cancel conversation. And with the cancel conversation, we will do back our dialog management and say cancel all active dialogues, which means that if we were in a conversation anywhere within the tree, we go back to the root of where you start. That's the only thing you need to add here. And then the get help, well, we'll just send a response. Just quickly copy of what I have here. We're just saying, again, I'm a weather bot. I can tell you the current weather condition. Just say weather. Okay. We go back to our triggers. We get weather was done on help. We will also do dialog management, begin a new dialog. And here we will go to the get help. And on our cancel, we'll do the same. And we do cancel conversation. Okay, so that's we have. I'll just restart in the meanwhile so we can check if this works, and I want to show you something else while testing it out. Now, if we go back to our get weather, and we have our bot asks, if you go to user input, other section, and you scroll down, you have an element here, allow interruptions. And on this moment, it is false. What does that mean? Let's start the conversation again. We have our triggers activated for help and for cancel. So if I would say help now, it will give me that instruction, what I gave in as a response. If I say cancel, well, it will not say anything, but it will reset back to, well, you could say to here, after your first message. Now let's go back to weather. What is your zip code? Well, I don't really understand that, so I click help, but it doesn't get that. Now, if we go to our get weather, we click on our bot asks, we go to other, and we say allow interruptions to true. We say it's restart bot again. Well, I'll drink something. Okay, let's restart our chatbot. Whether it will ask what's the zip code, but if I say help now, it will tell me what it went actually to this help dialog, but then it went back to get weather where we were. It didn't tell me first, let's check the weather, but it immediately went back to this question. So this is very, as for example, in this case, it's very handy to give your users some assistance in maybe difficult questions. Or if you go back to the idea of a chatbot for booking flights, you're booking a flight to, so you're in the process of booking a flight, and then suddenly you ask the chatbot, hey, but how is the weather there actually? Well, then you need to go to another dialogue, tell you the weather, and then go back once you finish that dialogue back to your booking process. So that's what you can do with this small but very wonderful flag. Okay, so we know our zip code now, and we would like to go further and actually get some data back from our environment, from an API, for example. Now, to do that, we have a lovely function to get data from external resources. So we will do now a call to an HTTP API, a REST API, but we can actually also connect to a skill, connect to QnA, do an OAuth login, so you can verify actually your users through an Azure Active Directory, for example, or your private enterprise OAuth connection. What is a skill? Which is something very important also. Within bot framework SDKs, you can build skills, and with skills is actually a chatbot on itself with specific features that you've built, but that you can reuse within other chatbots. Skills can be extensions, for example, also for the Power Virtual Agent. So the Power Virtual Agent is limited to specific, limited and technically in doing certain things. But if you want to do more advanced stuff, you can build it into a skill and tell your business users to connect to that one, and then it can still do those specific technical items that are not possible by default with Power Virtual Agent. Same for Bot Framework Composer. There might be certain things that are not possible yet with Bot Framework Composer because you are limited to your visual UI compared to the SDK where you have code-based building. So you can actually, you can do everything. You can call any libraries that you would like or any specific requests that are not by default possible within the composer. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to call a REST API. I'm going to copy here some items. So we'll do a get method and my URL. Now my URL exists out of a token that I've just configured. And I also use my user.zip code, which I can just give in as a parameter, as you can see, or variable. You can add headers and so on. We want to save the results from that call, of course, and in this case we'll save it just within our dialog because we don't need it within the conversation or on user level. And we say dialog.api/response. I will tell that the response type is JSON code. Okay, so we did our HTTP request. Well, what's the first thing we will check is, of course, the status of our call. So we add a condition. With the condition branch, we can say here that dialog dot API response. I'll just click on this, and then dot status code equals is to 200. So a successful call. Let me remove this. Okay. I'll just copy and paste this to be sure that I didn't make any typos. And from here we have a true and a false branch. Well, if it's true, we want to set a property. Now with properties, you can take specific items, for example, from our dialog.api response and set it into another variable. Again, we can use our dialog and we'll call this a dialog weather. So the variable dialog weather, we will configure it with the value from our API response, but .content. Now we have that, and we want to send a response to our user with all the details from the current weather. So we send a response, and here I will use another kind of message, and this kind it's a thumbnail card where I can add a title. And so we have the weather for, and now we are getting from our dialog.weather the city name. We'll generate some text that the weather is the weather that we get back from the API. We add the temperature to it, and we'll also add a nice image to it to make it a bit more visual. Now, of course, we also want to go to the false branch, and what we want to do there is, I'll copy this. Also send a response, but here we want to say an error happened, and we want to send back the error message we returned from the API. But then a very important one, we will go back to the property management, but here we will say delete a property. Now in this case, we will say user.zip codes, so it will clear that value. Why do we do that? There's a very good reason behind it. I told you that once you've saved something on the user level, that it stays all the time there. But that means because most of the issues we get with this HTTP request, that we could still do a branch here, that's, well, when there's an issue, it's because of the zip code that it was not correct. So we want to clear that item, again, because it's saved on user level. Now, if we go back to our bot asks, you will see in the other section, I'll scroll down, always prompt. In this case, it is false. What does that mean? When you switch always prompt to false, it means that once user.zip code is filled in, it will not ask for that question anymore. Therefore, again, why you have in bot framework emulator that you can say a new user ID or a current user ID. Let's have a try and see how that works. So I'll restart the bot. Our weather API should already being able to be called. Again, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to use the chat. Then I will answer them as quickly as possible. Good, so our chatbot has been rebuilt. We restart our conversation. And I say weather, what is your zip code? I'll say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it says, okay, weather for Schenectady, somewhere in the US. The weather is clouds and 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, if I restart the conversation with the same user ID, I click on it, of course. And now I say weather. It didn't ask me anymore. What is your zip code? Now, of course, we're in some blocked element because we cannot change our zip code anymore. So to be able to do that, we will start using Lewis now to interact with our whole bot story. Now, what will we do? We go back to our main dialog, and instead of regular expressions, we will choose default recognizer. Now, what you will see is on these 3 items, weather, help, and cancel, we will have an element that is called trigger phrases. Now, what I'm going to do there is, for example, at the help, we'll start with a simple one. We'll add a couple of sentences that we could say, so it's being seen as going to the help section. In that section, we also have our condition, and here we will say that our help intent needs a score of more than 50%. This is what we get back from Lewis. So we will send the input of the user, which might be one of these 4 or something equal, almost equal. Lewis will give it a score between 0 and 1, and if it's more than 0.5, well, then it's for sure that it's help. Now we can do exactly the same for cancel. All right. Now for our weather, we will do it a little bit different. What we will do there is we have default our items, get weather, weather, how is the weather, but we also add what is the weather in, and here we say zip code equals a number. You can fill in any number. We can do 990. So 1, for example, I think that's San Francisco. Now here we are training Lewis to understand the entities within the sentence. This is all elements that recognize the intent, but this part is recognizing the entity. So actually we could also use this and add city names, but that's depending on how your flow are working. You could say, for example, instead of zip code 90,001, you could say city equals to Stockholm. Okay, but in our example, we'll just keep it now to some numbers. Now, if it recognizes that there's a zip code within the item, it will send it also to the dialog. Now we need to accept, of course, that element, and to get there, we need to go back to our get weather, and we need to add here a set property. So we'll go to properties and do a set, and we'll do here again our user.zip code. And we say that our user.zip code is @zip code, $zip code, or user.zip code if it was already configured before. Because otherwise it would be reset if you didn't send it with the chat. Now, let's restart the bot. Now, once we want to restart the bot, it will ask us what are the details for me to connect to Lewis. I'll gonna copy those items from an existing item. Okay, you can change it here, but you can also do it somewhere else. I'll show you later. So we have our authoring key that we need to fill in. I will change this key afterwards so you cannot use it. And our my authoring region will be West Europe. And I say, okay. This publishing takes a little bit longer. Why? Because it's also sending the data to Lewis to change to create the model, and then send back another endpoint to call Lewis. Now, we'll look back in a bit also on Lewis where we can find these items back. I'll give it a couple of seconds to load. Start our conversation. Okay, now I can still call weather. My response encode does not indicate success. This is strange. So something went wrong. So I will restart for a second as a new user. Okay, so what is the weather in 90001? That's of course not good. A 401. That means my API is not correct. That's never nice, and that's of course the issue of live demos. Whether okay, I'm quickly gonna swap between environments, and I'm happy I have it also open here, where we have exactly the same. Now we call our API here. Tested an emulator. Okay, so what is the weather in 90001? Okay, weather for Los Angeles, it was not San Francisco, is clear and 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, if I ask again the weather, what is the weather? It will not ask me again for it. So if I would now change my question, what is the weather in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? It changed it because it noticed that I gave in another value, and now that item is saved as my current zip code, my user.zip code. So what is the weather should give me back to Schenectady correctly. Okay, now we have one more thing that I would like to show. We're nearing the end of this session. What I've added here in this weather bot already was an unknown intent. Now, if you click on your main dialog and you add a new trigger, you have the option to add an unknown intent. What does that mean? It means when it doesn't recognize that it's weather or help or cancel, well, then it will be sent to this one. Now, when it's an unknown intent, I like to send it to the QnA Maker, because in the QnA Maker we can have a full knowledge base with many more questions that doesn't need any actions at all. So we have QnA, we call a dialog, and here I have I have my QnA dialog where I add one specific block, and that's connected to QnA knowledge base. Now in QnA knowledge base, you can find here at access external resources. And the only thing that needs to be configured, which is actually out of the box, you don't need to do anything about it, is what's your knowledge base ID, endpoint, hostname, and so on. I've already configured it. We'll show you all the configuration settings in a bit also. No, I didn't want to. Back to emulator. If I ask the question, what is reactor Stockholm? Well, that's not whether, that's not cancel or not help, and I did not find an answer. That might be because I did not publish it, so I'll ask who is Sami, and it gives me a nice answer on it. Now let's go to QnA Maker. It should be this one. Okay, so I have these 3 questions. I probably didn't click save and train yet. Let's go back to our emulator. What about reactor Stockholm? Okay, so somehow it doesn't get connected to this one. Can't recall exactly why this is the case. So we know. Now, this is purely the QnA Maker. There is a new functionality within Bot Framework Composer, which is QnA, where we can add our own QnA from URL or add, well, maintain our full knowledge base within Bot Framework Composer. I haven't been able yet to get it up and running, but it was the first release where this got added to, but it looks really promising of how it will work. Now, to go to the side here of Bot Framework Composer as some final thoughts, we have, of course, here on the side our full design of all the different dialogues we have, or triggers we see on the, that are connected with our dialogues. Then we have our bot responses. This is actually all the things we are saying to the user. So we could use, instead of, let's go back to our welcome user, this part, we could actually just copy this and do welcome message and save that item within our responses here. So we see here everything that is being set, and we can also manipulate it to what we would like to do. The same thing for user input, and here we will have an overview of our triggers. If we click more details on, for example, WeatherBot, or QnA, is it the WeatherBot? We can also edit it immediately here in code. All these items are sent to Louis, as I already said. And how does that look like? Let me go to Louis. Live demos. Always something that needs to go wrong. Okay. I connect, I see my authoring. Switch to a different directory, maybe this one. Okay, here we go. Louis bot demo authoring. Cool, so this is not the one I wanted to connect to, it's the other one. Did I click the same one? Okay, but it is the same behavior. But of course here it will be empty probably. No, okay. So in this case, it's some other intents. This is in Dutch, it says thank you intents. When the user said, super, thank you for the information, thanks for arranging everything, well, then it will recognize it as the thank you intent. Same for help. So we would see all these different lines as we saw in Bot Framework Composer also here. So it sends back to Lewis, and here we can see them again more in a visual way. Here in this version, you will also see the specific entities that are recognized. And in our case, it would be the zip code. Now, if you alter something here, it will not reflect it back in Bot Framework Composer. If you restart your chatbot in Bot Framework Composer, it will be overwritten in this portal. So don't change on two sides, because it's the Bot Framework Composer will always win in overriding what you see here. Keep that in mind. Now back to Bot Framework Composer. So we had the user input. This is sent to Lewis. We have our QnA items. We have a list of notifications when there's some errors in our dialogues of variables that are not set and so onwards. We have all the items to make publish profiles, so we can, for example, deploy to a dev environment, an acceptance, production, or what you would like, with different destinations types. If you want to publish a bot as a web app or as an Azure function. And then last but not even last, connect to a skill. So within Bot Framework Composer, you can connect to a specific skill built in Bot Framework SDK. And then last but not least is a list actually with all your settings for the bots, for your chatbots. For deployment, you need your app password, your app ID, your link to your Cosmos DB for saving all that user information or dialogue or conversation items. For development, that's not really necessary to save that in a Cosmos DB, because you can just keep track of it within the memory of your server, which actually is also possible on Azure, but it's not advised to do that on a production level item. You have your full configuration to all the items of Lewis, your QnA elements. You can also add some telemetry and so on, your default language. And that's a bit it. Now, some new features that are coming also is already in the nightly versions is, for example, a multi-language chatbots. So you can handle that also. So this is really cool. Also some more features within configuration with QnA Maker. So a lot of cool stuff are really coming up for sure. Keep on checking the conversational AI blogs of Microsoft or the GitHub page of Bot Framework SDK and Bot Framework Composer. And I want to go back to my slides. And I don't know how it is on. With that, well, I still open the platform for more questions. You can always reach me on my Twitter account at Sami Depre if you have more questions. I'm happy to help you with if you have any questions around Bot Framework Composer or any Microsoft AI issues. And please don't hesitate to fill in the survey so I can also know where I can improve my sessions or what kind of different information you would like to hear on this kind of sessions. So thank you very much for joining me tonight. I wish you all a wonderful evening or still a wonderful day, and hope to see you soon again. Thank you.
Sami, thank you so much for this evening's session. It's been great to have you, and thank you for a fantastic session. As I mentioned, we did record this session and it will go live on our YouTube channel. So for any attendees who are still with us, I'll post that link on the Meetup channel by the end of the week, so you'll be able to access it there. So thank you once again. Enjoy the rest of your day or evening, and hope to see you at the next Reactor session.
Good evening, everyone.